Hello and welcome to How to Crack Christ University Entrance Test. Today, I'll take you through the courses and the selection process, Christ 2023 paper pattern and good score, section-wise important topics and the prep plan, and we'll also discuss the overall strategy in this video. So let's have a look at the selection process for the entrance test based courses at Christ University. The entrance test is conducted in 2 rounds and admissions are offered after each round of selection. The deadline to apply for round 1 this year was 7th April and for the round 2 it is 30th April 2023. In the first step, the entrance test is conducted. This year, the 2 rounds for entrance test are happening on 14th April and 5th May respectively. For the 14th April round, the micro presentation and the PI process is the next step, which is supposed to happen from 17th April to 26th April, after which the admissions would be rolled out. Similarly, for the 5th May attempt, the admissions would be rolled out after micro presentation is conducted from 8th May to 17th May. All students have to go through both the steps and the final admission is given on the basis of a composite score which is calculated on the basis of entrance test, micro presentation and personal interview. Let's have a look at the courses offered through the entrance test. So the courses offered are a lot of variations of the BBA course like BBA in Business Analytics, BBA in Finance and Economics, BBA in Finance and International Business, and the standalone BBA Honours and Honours with Research. Now, as you look at this slide, you would notice that for each course there's an Honours and an Honours with Research mentioned. What is this? As per the latest New Education Policy 2020, we all know that if you leave any course at any point of time, you are eligible to get something. It will have credit system. So therefore, if you leave a course after 1 year, you get a certificate. If you leave a course after 2 years, you can get a diploma. Similarly, if you leave after 3 years, you get a regular degree. And if you continue for 4 years in a course, you get an honors degree. In the 4th year, you are expected to do additional research or in-depth studies of a certain topic. So that is why the 4th year comes with an honors degree. Now, without going into the details more, we should focus on what are the courses that are offered here. So here you have BBA and you have a lot of commerce, data science, analytics, economics, arts, humanities, sociology, mass media, etc. and a lot of different courses offered, including science also. But for the sake of this video, we'll be focusing on BBA entrance test only. At the end of this video, I'll definitely show you the list of all the entrances that Christ conducts and what are the degrees that they offer through those entrances. So moving on, let us quickly have a look at the paper pattern of the BBA entrance test. BBA entrance test has 6 sections: English, Quantitative aptitude, Fundamental accountancy, Logical reasoning, General knowledge, and Data interpretation and analysis. The number of questions are different for each section and the total comes up to 120 questions and the total time given is 90 minutes. Now, important to note over here is that when you take the paper, the questions are not segregated section wise. They are all jumbled up. So you could get one question of maths and the next question could be a logical reasoning question, then you could get a verbal question, then GK, again a maths, 2-3 questions of maths on the trot or something like that. It's all random, it's not segregated section wise. Further, the marking scheme is +1 for a correct answer and -0.25 for a wrong answer. So there is negative marking, so one needs to be careful while attempting the Christ University entrance test. Based on the feedback that we've received from students and the students who cleared the exam in the past, it has been observed that any student who is able to attempt around 90 to 100 questions in the 90 minutes has generally done a good job and can expect to get a good score in the entrance test. Now let's quickly have a look at the analysis of the 2023 round 1 paper, which was conducted on the 14th of April 2023. So as we know, there was negative marking and students had to be cautious while attempting the questions. A score of 65 to 70 can be considered a good score, and students can expect to have a good chance at the selection after the micro presentation and PI rounds. And as per the quality or the difficulty of the questions, the good attempts section wise would be 22 in English, 14 in maths, 7 in accountancy, 22 in logical reasoning, around 15 to 16 questions of general knowledge, and data interpretation and analysis to be 14 out of 20. Now you notice that the maths and the data interpretation are slightly calculative and time consuming. That is, you would take around 1 minute, 10 seconds to solve one question of these topics on an average. And that is why here the proportion of questions in the good attempts is slightly lower as compared to the other sections. You have to score very well in the verbal ability and the logical reasoning section. Let us quickly have a look at the section-wise strategy and the preparation plan to understand how we can prepare better for the future rounds of Christ University entrance test. So looking at the prep plan for QA, as we can see the section-wise number of topics, there were 4 to 5 questions from numbers section, so numbers also has a good weightage. Arithmetic has the highest weightage with questions from percentages, profit loss, SICI, ratio proportion averages, and time and work. Further, there were good number of questions from algebra as well, including linear and quadratic equations. One of questions from indices, surds and log as well, and a good number of questions from set theory, probability and permutations combination as well. However, the level of difficulty was easy to moderate. You could almost solve questions in 1 minute per question. The lengthier questions were supposed to be skipped. So there were 3-4 questions which were slightly lengthier to read or could be time consuming. So those questions were supposed to be left. Good attempts would be around 14 to 15. And if you ask me for the prep plan, most students who did well in the test told me that even if one had solved 1 or 2 exercises for each of the chapters, they could have handled the questions. The questions were not very tricky. Now moving on towards English. English was a little standard. There were not very tricky questions here again. So English had 2 RCs of 4 to 5 questions each. In grammar, the questions were error spotting. So you were given a sentence and you had to find which part of the sentence had an error. Then in vocabulary, when I say spelling, there was a sentence which had a fill in the blanks. And in the blank, whatever word would come had 4 spellings in the option and you had to choose the right spelling for that word. So commonly confused words and commonly misspelt words were tested over here. Further, in the vocabulary part, synonyms, antonyms and meanings were also tested. Almost 3 to 4 questions of those types as well. There were 2 to 3 questions of parajumbles as well. The total number of questions in the verbal section was 25. However, these questions were all spread out, as we know it is jumbled up. So you won't find them in one go. Only the reading comprehension questions could be found together because they come with a single passage. The level of difficulty was easy. Average time duration would be 45 seconds per question. Good attempts would be 22 questions. The preparation strategy is very simple. As the question is dominated by reading comprehension and vocabulary, you need to do daily vocabulary like solving or learning 15 to 20 new words every day. Daily reading an article daily or solving reading comprehensions daily would be very helpful, and solving grammar exercises would kind of come in handy for the error spotting questions. It was possible to score very high in this section. Someone who's very good at verbal could also have scored 25 out of 25. Now looking at the LR section, the number of questions here again was 25, and students found this section to also be on the easier side. There were questions from logical series, coding, decoding, and all these topics from analytical reasoning. Apart from this, there were questions from verbal reasoning as well, like cause and effect, statement conclusion, and a few miscellaneous verbal reasoning questions. Based on the feedback, it can be interpreted that the level of difficulty of the questions was on the easy side, and one could have easily solved questions on a 45-second per question average time, and you could easily have solved 22 questions in the given time. Therefore, the strategy for this was very simple. For analytical reasoning, you had to work on speed. Therefore, for analytical reasoning, you had to be fast with a good accuracy. For that, you have to practice a lot of questions. And basically, if you move on towards the verbal reasoning part, verbal reasoning involves in-depth understanding of concepts. So if you are clear with the concepts of cause and effect, statement, conclusion, you could have handled the verbal reasoning section or the questions as well. And verbal reasoning questions, for conceptual clarity, you need to ensure that you learn from the right source and understand the concept with complete clarity while you're learning. After that, even if you solve 1 or 2 exercises per chapter, that would be sufficient. If we look at the DI section surprisingly had 20 questions, and they were all based on bar graphs and line graphs. There were 3 sets of bar graphs and 1 set on line graph. Now DI, as has been the case in all exams, you'd find that the questions are maths based, so therefore they are a little calculative. Hence, the level of questions was considered to be easy to moderate in comparison to the other sections. But if you look at it standalone as compared to DI, the level was easy only. Time taken would be around 1 minute per question. Because there was interpretation from the graph involved, some students could have taken a little more over here as well. However, one needs to keep in mind that if you look at the total time that we had allocated in the starting slides, you would see that I had only assigned 80 minutes for the solving and 10 minutes would be buffer. So some of you would take a little extra time in one of the sections, some would take a little extra time in one other section. So that buffer time can be managed as per your convenience. Also, because we are scrolling through a lot of questions, there'll be some questions which you'll skip, and that is where your buffer time would go. So here you would give around 1 to 1.5 minutes per question. Okay, a good number of attempts would be 14 to 15. Now, to ace the DI section of Christ University, what you need is simply practice. So for practice, you need to first improve your speed because you have to solve these many questions in the limited time. Therefore, you need to work on speed maths that is available as a topic in IMS material as well. Further, percentages, ratios and averages are very important from the calculation point of view and application point of view as well. And profit and loss is tested in the application, as an application in the DI section. So that would be what is required to crack the DI section. Now, looking at the GK and the current affairs section, there were almost 12 to 13 questions from the current affairs, that is the dynamic part of GK, and only 7 to 8 questions from the static GK part. The GK questions were based on who was the president in a certain year, or who authored this book, whereas from the current affairs, there were questions based on recent appointments, who was appointed as the CEO of a certain company, and there were questions on, prizes that were distributed in the recent years. So it was a mix of current affairs as well as GK. Now, to do well in current affairs and GK, you can't rely on the last couple of days. You have to have good practice, or you have to be in touch with the current affairs and GK for a slightly longer duration of time. So the level of difficulty was easy to moderate. If you knew the question, you could answer it. If you don't know, there's no way, by scratching your head, you could get to the answer. Therefore, you don't need more than 20 to 30 seconds per question. A good number of attempts would be 16 or more. And for a prep strategy from a future point of view, you should read daily newspapers. You should prepare for weekly current affairs. And if you are an IMS student, you also get access to a lot of GK resources on the IMS GK portal. So you should study one GK topic every day from the portal, or you should solve a quiz that day, or you should study one weekly current affairs topic from the GK zone of my IMS. So if you do this much, you would be in a good position to handle the GK and current affairs section of Christ. Also, as an IMS student, you get access to the Christ Compendium, which is a collection of typical questions that can be asked in the Christ University entrance. For the fundamental accountancy section, the level of difficulty was easy to moderate. Almost 45 seconds would be sufficient to solve a certain question. Good attempts would be 7 to 8. And about this section, what was tested was the basic concepts of accounts, not a lot of solving. But if you had the conceptual clarity, you just had to answer the questions in the MCQ format. So something which is not tested in the subjective part, but if you have the clarity, only then you will be able to answer in the MCQ section or in the MCQ type questions is what is tested over here. So as a prep strategy, while you just have to work or study whatever you did in your class 11th or 12th, you should definitely practice 4 to 5 topic-wise tests or MCQ tests on this topic. And if you have the basic conceptual clarity, you would easily be able to handle the questions. So 4 to 5 tests and revision of the class 12th accounts should be sufficient. And as an overall strategy, decision making for solving or leaving questions has to be very quick because you have to attempt almost 120 questions in 90 minutes. So therefore, you can't take more than 15-20 seconds to decide whether you are going to solve this question or leave the question. If you decide to solve a question but then get stuck up, leave the question as soon as possible. Don't stay stuck up on any question. If the concept is not known, you're definitely not supposed to answer the question. Do not guess answers because there is negative marking. Maximize on your strength. If you are strong in a certain area, you need to score 90% in that section. And if you are weak in a certain section, then at least try to get 50 or 60% marks because the level of difficulty is not very high. So if you know the basics also, you'll be able to handle those questions. And finally, topics like GK, current affairs and vocabulary need longer duration of practice. So please give them time every day. That will help you in improving the scores in the long term. And finally, the most important part is taking 2 to 3 mock tests to get adapted to the test pattern and the time limit that you have in a Christ entrance test to be able to apply your strategy in the actual test. And if you do that, your test taking skills would definitely get very sharp and you'll be able to apply your concepts in the test in the limited time. So I hope this video was helpful. All the best. And as I told you, there are a lot of other courses which take Christ University entrance test. But the degrees are different, that is BCom, BA and so on. So here, we'll just play the list of courses and the entrance test structure for each course. You can go through them.